All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining and viewing this. I know that originally we had planned to do this on a Facebook Live event. Unfortunately, had some technical difficulties, so when you are viewing this, it will be on the Facebook and recorded. We do apologize for the inconvenience with the technical difficulties, but we are still appreciative and thankful to have our speakers here today to talk about responsible gun ownership and also talking about gun violence prevention and what we are doing at the law enforcement level, at the legislative level, and at an advocacy level to not only promote gun safety, but also to prevent gun violence. Additionally, we were planning on having a live Q&A with the live Facebook event. Since this is being recorded, obviously that won't be live, but we will have something to go along with this recording once it's posted on our social media to allow the public to ask any questions that we may not have touched upon in this webinar, or just any questions or comments that you may have. So definitely be on the lookout for that when we post this on our social media pages. But to start, I just wanted to go over the purpose of the webinar today and to state, what it is that we are going to be talking about in this webinar today. First and foremost, our primary goals. The first one is we're looking to raise awareness about the importance of responsible gun ownership, but also gun violence prevention at the same time. Additionally, we're looking to educate the community on or safe gun practices and prevention measures. And then we're looking to showcase collaboration between law enforcement, legislators, and advocacy groups in addressing this issue. At the same time, we're looking to empower citizens with the knowledge and the tools to contribute to a safer community. And then lastly, we're looking to really facilitate an interactive discussion where participants can ask questions and share their concerns. Unfortunately, since this is being recorded, that can't be done live, but we're looking forward to doing that after this meeting is recorded and posted on our social media pages, because we still want to have that dialogue with the public. But at the same time, really, this is an opportunity to learn from experts and at the same time go over actionable steps that we can take to make our community safer. So the speakers that we have here today, wanted to welcome Pennsylvania State Representative Christopher Pielli, as well as CeaseFirePA Southeast PA organizer Grant Maurer. And then with us at the Sheriff's Office, we have Chester County Sheriff Kevin Dykes, as well as Chester County Chief Deputy Jason Suydam. The first thing that I wanted to touch upon before we get into our speakers and looking at what we're doing at a law enforcement, legislative, and advocacy level is I just wanted to go over some statistics about gun violence in Pennsylvania. So in an average year, 1,713 people are killed by gun violence in the state of Pennsylvania. Additionally, 1,992 individuals are wounded by gun violence. In addition to that, 41% of gun deaths are homicides and 57% of gun deaths are suicides. Lastly, and unfortunately, guns are the leading cause of death among children and teens. And we will be going over some safe storage practices and things that you can do if you are a gun owner who has a child to prevent your child from obtaining a gun and possibly using it in a way that could be harmful. But gun violence is a pressing issue in Pennsylvania. And really the purpose of today is go over gun safety techniques while at the same time going over our efforts collaboratively to address gun violence and gun violence prevention. The first thing that I wanted to touch upon was looking at some recent trends and incidents. And really this is for all of you, but first, I wanted to start with Representative Pielli. Just wanted to ask, what have you seen at a legislative level in terms of recent incidents or trends of gun violence that are affecting communities within Chester County?
Well, thank you, Noah, and thank you to Sheriff Dykes and Chief Deputy Suydam for doing this. This is a very important issue, as you cited in your opening. It is the major cause of death for our children and our teenagers, so I can't think of anything more important than we should be addressing. This last legislative session has been very busy. We've been trying to get across the finish line sensible, common sense gun safety legislation. We've had some success, but it's been limited. We're hoping to have some more success. Uh, we have three major bills that have been passed. We have House Bill 714, which removes the loophole that allows for purchases of long guns to be exempt from background checks and waiting period. We have House Bill 777, which prohibits the purchase, sale, and production of ghost gun parts, which we've been seeing a lot of lately. And we have House Bill 1018, which permits a family member of or law enforcement officer to petition a court to temporarily prohibit an individual from purchasing or possessing a firearm if they're believed to be a danger to themselves or others. You may have heard that described as a red flag law, or some states have them. Believe it or not, states like Florida actually has similar legislation. I'm the co-sponsor, along with many of my colleagues in our caucus, for all three of those and more bills that we're seeing coming. But we've had some unfortunate setbacks as recently. We've seen some setbacks for things that I think the vast majority of Pennsylvanians want, but the political atmosphere and the power of the NRA and other similar groups, lobbyists, have really swayed too many of our fellow colleagues not to vote for some of these pieces of legislation. And I'm sure Grant's going to speak a little bit to that in a little while, but that's just an idea of some of the things that we have passed. We have also tried to pass lost and stolen, which I know is popular amongst law enforcement. It's simple. It helps to prevent straw purchasers. If you realize that your gun is lost, your handgun is stolen or something, you have 72 hours, plenty of time to notify law enforcement to say, my gun's missing or someone stole my gun. And this is in hopes of cutting down on what we've seen regarding straw purchases who have been questioned about certain activities, and they say, well, I lost my gun. I don't know what happened to it. Well, they're buying it and they're selling it to folks that shouldn't be. Maybe they're convicted felons, etc., that should not be carrying a weapon, and they're turning around and selling that. So that's something that we're trying to work on. Recently, you've heard in the news a lot. The Supreme Court came down with a decision, but it seems like it's still left up to states in some aspect, which is the bump stocks, converting single-shot semi-automatic weapons into basically machine guns. That's something that we've been trying to do, but unfortunately that failed. So we're trying, and we're trying to work with our law enforcement. We're trying to convince people that we're not coming after their guns. We just want common sense gun legislation that will help save lives.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Representative Pielli. And I was going to turn it over to you, Grant. It's a perfect segue. Like Representative Pielli said, I'm sure you might be seeing some of the same things. I was just curious, before I turn it over to the sheriff and chief deputy, what is it that you're seeing out there in the community and at an advocacy level in terms of gun violence and the impact that it is having on Chester County? You're on mute, Grant.
Yeah, thank you for telling me that, and thank you for having me.
Of course.
I mean, I'm going to echo a lot of what Representative Pielli has said. There's a lot of these issues that, I think we're able to address legislatively. The other thing that is super important is doing work in the communities. That's something that Ceasefire likes to do. We like to work with violence interrupters, with organizations that specialize in that, because, at the end of the day, legislative action isn't going to be the only part of the solution. And I think, as we talk about gun violence in Chester County, I think that we see it impact people in a lot of different ways, but I think that the one consistent theme that I've seen, especially with the Supreme Court ruling this past week, we've seen that people really want to make a change. People want something to be done about this. They realize that it's a problem. They realize that we need to come together for a solution. So I think that unfortunately, it's affected a lot of people in our county, in our community, and we just want to see people band together to make some kind of change happen.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Grant. And then for Sheriff Dykes and Chief Deputy Suydam, what have you both seen, from a law enforcement perspective in terms of gun violence in our community, and any recent trends that you may have seen in regards to gun violence?
So, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Representative Pielli and also Grant for joining us on this. One of the things I will tell you is Chester County right now, thus far, we've experienced approximately 5 homicides and 10 shootings. As you know, in the city of Philadelphia, the gun violence is down about 20%. So obviously that's impacting us out here. We're fortunate in the event that we're not experiencing the same issues as Philadelphia, but because we are only 20 some miles away, it could be very easily crossed into our borders. So I think we're fortunate enough at this point with those numbers that I'm not sure what it is that we're doing that's exactly right, but we're doing something.
Absolutely. And then, Chief, was there anything that you wanted to add on to that?
No, I know I'll speak more to our role that we play when it relates to preventing gun violence with the Sheriff's Office.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thank you all for that, for the recent trends, things that you're seeing, at a legislative level, law enforcement level, and an advocacy level. Representative Pielli, you did already talk about some bills that are out there aimed at preventing gun violence. Was just curious with those, or my question would be, what existing laws are currently being implemented at the state level to reduce gun violence in Chester County, and at the same time, how effective have those pieces of legislation been in reducing gun violence?
Well, I guess, no, the first place you would start with is, Title 18 and Section 6109 of the Pennsylvania Consolidated Statutes, and that requires an extensive background check to run on the purchasing individual during the sale or transfer, but it's of handguns. So that's one of the big issues there. These background checks include examination of the purchaser's criminal history, their character, their mental health. Title 18, Section 6111 adds to these provisions by requiring a 48-hour waiting period between the sale and the delivery of the firearm. But as I mentioned before, these laws are not as effective as they could be, considering they only pertain to the sale of handguns. Therefore, certain firearms, known as long guns, ranging from longer barreled pistols to rifles, are still exempt from the background check and the waiting period. Now, I did mention we passed that bill for the loophole for long guns, HB 714, but that's just in the House. Like many other bills, they're languishing in the Senate, where a lot of things go off and die, unfortunately. But this, again, is just a common sense gun legislation piece to expand into long guns, because we do have crimes that are homicides and gun violence from long guns, not just handguns. So we would start with that seems to have been the major problem for some time now, that it's applied in a limited scope. I think the other thing that we're hearing legislatively, I get from a lot of the colleagues on the other side of this issue, is that this isn't going to solve murders, or this isn't going to solve violence. Well, you can make that argument, honestly, for any law. I mean, we've had the murder statutes, aggravated assault, we've had robbery statutes. These things still happen. That doesn't mean that you try not to mitigate them by creating laws and standards for a civilized society. So yeah, I suspect that these crimes would not go away, but they will be diminished greatly. And if we can save even a few lives, these common sense gun legislation pieces that are out there waiting for the Senate would be well worth it.
Absolutely. And then, like I said, you did a great job previously talking about the bills and pieces of legislation out there aimed at preventing gun violence. My question would be: are there any bills or amendments that you are currently sponsoring or supporting that are aimed to prevent and reduce gun violence?
Yeah, there's actually a whole bunch that we have out there, along with the three that I mentioned that have passed in the House. I've co-sponsored several other bills aimed at preventing gun violence, to include House Bill 2206, which requires all licensed firearm sellers to electronically submit their records of sales to the state police to ensure guns can be more efficiently registered. The law as it stands now, it could be by mail. It could take some time. It's slow. It's not up with the current standards of our technology, and we may be able to catch something sooner if we are able to file these things electronically. House Bill 731 requires safe storage of long gun firearms before the sale. Safe storage, we've had some really bad outcomes. The sheriffs can tell you about folks, leaving weapons out for young kids to get a hold of, and some terrible things happen. House Bill 1629 requires safe storage of firearms in the home if a minor is likely to access them. For the same reason. House Bill 1117 prohibits the purchase, sale, and possession of armor-piercing ammunition, with exceptions for law enforcement and armed services when they're on duty. We're seeing these bullets out there that can actually pierce protective armor that our law enforcement officers are wearing, and there's just no place for that out in the streets. House Bill 1974 requires schools to consider implementing a panic alarm system. It's sad that we even have to think about that these days, but we've seen these terrible, terrible stories. And, perhaps if there were panic alarms, we might be able to get the kids out faster. We're trying to come up with ideas to deal with these terrible realities. House Bill 766 has the same provision as House Bill 714, with the addition of allowing for a single background check that would be valid for 48 hours for use at a gun show. So we never hear a lot about these gun show loopholes. So we're trying to get our arms around that too. House Bill 338 requires a person to report a stolen or missing firearm within 72 hours. I mentioned that before. It's a no-brainer. I'll tell you another thing that the folks on the other side of this say is, you're making victims out of gun owners, because if they don't report their weapon lost or stolen, how are they to know? They have to know. It's a requirement that the gun owner, it has to be proven that the gun owner knows that the weapon is lost or stolen. Then they have the 72 hours to report. This law isn't about coming up to someone and saying, hey, where's that Colt 45 that you bought 20 years ago, and you look and you can't find it, and all of a sudden you're charged. No, it's when you discover that it's lost or stolen, you have 72 hours to report. It's a very common sense bill, but you see how they try to twist and turn and scare people away from this common sense legislation. We also have House Bill 335, which adds as I mentioned before, the accelerated trigger activator and machine gun aspect to the definition of offensive weapons, which are illegal.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you for that. And I wanted to continue with you, Representative Pielli, on a different note. Want to talk to you in terms of funding and grants. And my first question to you in that regard would be: are there any state level funding initiatives or grants that are available that would support gun violence prevention programs?
Yeah, so I'm happy to report that our caucus and our governor are really take this seriously, and there's increased grant funding available. For example, the 2024-2025 budget that Governor Shapiro has proposed sets aside $100 million to go towards gun violence prevention efforts. You could break that down. For example, both the violence intervention and prevention program and the gun violence investigation and prosecution program at the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency are receiving $37.5 million each. The two programs work with local communities and local law enforcement to reduce and prosecute crimes related to gun violence. The Nonprofit Security Grant Fund at the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency is getting $5 million, an increase of $5 million, to help places of worship and community centers to equip themselves with security measures. Again, it's very unfortunate that we even have to consider these type of things, but our recent past history has shown that we have to do something about it. 1 million is going to the firearm prevention program within the Department of Health for data collection and analysis around gun violence. 11.5 million to create a statewide building opportunity throughout the school time programs and aimed at reducing community violence through offering more after school learning opportunities, which is good. It's trying to get the kids off the street and in an environment where, you know, you can get to them and teach them some things and, you know, different skills to avoid violent outcomes. And there's 11 million within the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency to create more welcoming environments by building parks and improving shared spaces. Again, this is the idea of getting kids to an area where they can play. They could be kids. They could interact and give them alternatives.
Absolutely. And then my last question for you, Representative Piele, before I turn it over to the sheriff and the chief. For any local organizations who would be seeking state funding for gun violence prevention, what advice would you have for them?
Well, the first thing I would say is please contact our office because we usually have a lot of that information available at our fingertips, and we can provide letters of support and we can advocate and lobby for that, for example, a nonprofit or school or whatever to help get them those funds. So I would suggest, you know, you could always go on the website looking for different grant available at the state, especially what I just mentioned, the PCCD. They'll have these things all listed out there. But if you need a contact point for someone to help, that's part of our job. We would be more than happy to help folks.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Representative Piele. Now, next, I want to turn it over to the sheriff's office. And first, with the sheriff's office, I wanted to touch upon what the office is doing to prevent gun violence, and then wanted to turn it over to talk about what individuals can do to be responsible gun owners. So, Sheriff Dykes and Chief Deputy Suydam, I was wondering, my first question, first and foremost, what specific responsibilities does the sheriff's office have in enforcing gun laws and responding to gun violence incidents? And would you be able to share any successes or any examples in doing that?
Sure, I can speak to that. So as you said, one of the most obvious responsibilities of our office is to enforce gun laws when necessary, but another important piece is the response to threats. So our deputies are tasked with protecting the courts and also the county facilities, but they're also out on the road every day. They're serving civil process, they're serving warrants, they're doing evictions. So they're interacting with the public on an everyday basis. But one of the important things to note there is that they are trained to respond to active threats, incidents that are happening in any of those areas. They work with the local municipalities and the police departments in training for active threats, whether it be at a school, a public place, or anywhere in any of the surrounding jurisdictions. So that's really important. But I'll note that when you talk about specific incidents, we've actually had 3 deputies shot. So we know the dangers of the job and the importance of these types of discussions and training. We had an incident here just, I think within the last 10 years where we had a fatal shooting and a deputy shot in that incident. So, but fortunately, our deputies were well trained and responded appropriately in that circumstance. But again, this is more so a reason for us to have these types of discussions and why we want to be engaged in this type of effort. But I'll touch on 2 other specific areas related to the sheriff's office as well. One of them has to do with our responsibility to issue concealed carry permits. So we issue about, I'd say 6,000 to 8,000 on average after we looked at it over the last 5 years. And part of that process is, one, to ensure that we're issuing that within in accordance with the law, but also to prevent individuals who have criminal history, mental health issues, drug or alcohol abuse issues from getting those types of permits. And we do that through comprehensive background checks, ensuring that we pay attention to our process and that's one way that we help to prevent these types of gun violence incidents. But another part that we play is the relinquishment of weapons as it results to protection from abuse orders. So our deputies are tasked with the service of protection from abuse orders, but also we collect weapons that are required to be relinquished as a part of the order. And what our deputies will do is make sure that that's done in a timely manner, in a safe way. We're responsible for collecting the weapons from the defendants and then storing them and making sure that they're either returned in a safe manner or destroyed if that's part of the process as well. So I mean, we play a number of different roles, and I think that's just a quick snapshot of some of the things that we do.
Awesome. Anything you want to add to that, Sheriff?
Yeah, just to give some specific numbers to what Chief Suydam was referring to. Right now, we're on track for the month of June. We're halfway through the year. We're over 3,000, issuing 3,000 license to carry. So we're probably right on track with what he said, with probably somewhere close to 60,000 per year. With regards to relinquishing of weapons for PFAs, right now in 2024, we're on track. We're right at about close to 200 thus far this year.
Awesome. My next question then for the both of you would be, how does the Sheriff's Office collaborate with local, state, and federal agencies to address gun violence and prevent gun violence within Chester County?
I could touch on a couple of those things. So we do actively participate in intel sharing with our partners. We work very closely with them on ensuring that we communicate with each other about incidents that are occurring within our jurisdictions. So that's an important piece that I think sometimes gets overlooked, is the necessary communication that's required in order to prevent these types of incidents from occurring. But we do a pretty good job of working with our local, state, and federal.
Awesome. And then was there anything you wanted to add to that, Sheriff, in regards to collaborating with local, state, and federal agencies?
Well, in addition to what the chief was saying, part of that responsibility of us here at the Sheriff's Department is to provide safety and security for our county facilities, which we all know a lot of our governmental services are provided here. So quite often on a frequent basis, most people, when they come to the Justice Center, it's usually not for anything positive, unfortunately. So therefore, we always have to be on a swivel, and people have to be on our radar that are coming in and out of here on a daily basis. We get anywhere between 900 to 1,000 people that walk through those doors on a daily basis. So we constantly have to be aware of, to the best of our ability, with gathering intel of those that are coming in here for various things, such as trials, other court proceedings, and such things that take place here in the Justice Center.
Awesome. And then my last question, just in regards to the role of the Sheriff's Office in preventing gun violence, is how does the office use data to understand and address gun violence in Chester County?
I'll touch on that. So not only do we have our own records management system that we analyze, but again, this goes back to the point in making sure that we have discussions with our, not only our local partners, but our state and federal partners as well. And there's some requirements in the uniform crime reporting that we can look at. Also, some other statistics, that are available to law enforcement folks about the response and how many types of incidents we're dealing with in certain areas, trends, those types of things. But again, it goes back to the importance of communicating with our partners.
Awesome. And then in terms of responsible gun ownership, because you both touched upon it, the Sheriff's Office issuing, licenses to carry, I wanted to touch upon, individuals who are gun owners, strategies, techniques, tips for being a responsible gun owner. So Sheriff and Chief, I wanted to ask you first, what are some recommended safe storage practices for individuals who own firearms, and why are safe storage practices important for preventing accidents and also at the same time unauthorized access?
Well, that's a great question. First, I just want to touch on, responsible gun ownership has to come down to the use and where that gun is at all times. So one of the things that I express to gun owners is it's your responsibility as an owner to make sure that that gun is properly stored, to make sure that it's out of reach of those that it's not intended to be used on, and to basically educate yourself. And one of the steps that we've taken during this administration, we had the first, a couple of weeks ago, was a gun safety course that we provide for free of charge to any gun owner here and the resident of Chester County. I would say that, that would be the first step, particularly if you're considering it, is to learn the various dynamics of the use of gun ownership and the responsibilities that go along with it. That course is, I think, a very excellent course. It's put on by two of our highly trained firearms instructors. And that hopefully is the first of many courses that we'll put on throughout the year. Right now, we're looking at perhaps doing it quarterly, but my hope is that the more interest that we get, the more that we be more frequent to have. With regards to talk about gun ownership and safety, the 3 rules that we teach is you always should have a gun in a safe, okay, in the home, and a secured safe, locked safe. Too many times, and we all are very familiar with the situation regarding the 6-year-old child that shot his teacher in Virginia, not, within the last year. It's unfortunate in a situation, but that clearly comes down to carelessness on the owner of who owns that weapon. So one of the things that we do is we also, they're free here when you come to apply for your license to carry, we issue gun locks. And it's free of charge. It's the same thing when you take the safety course. We have gun locks that we provide. But I would highly recommend anyone that wants to own a gun to take a gun safety course. It doesn't necessarily have to be with the sheriff's office, but as I indicated, it's for free. And then perhaps consider taking lessons of how to utilize the weapon and, basic skills of basically if a gun is stored, it should be stored unloaded and not necessarily, that way it's clearly to be safe for anyone who is not the entitled owner.
Definitely. And Chief, was there anything that you wanted to add to that in terms of safe storage practices?
Sure. Mine, I'll gear towards just the education piece. I know we emphasize the importance of educating the children, and if you're going to have a gun in your house, on what those safe practices are. But 2 things to keep in mind: 1, children that come to your house that you haven't talked to, and you have that gun stored in a safe location, but you don't know who these kids are sometimes coming in and what their education level is, and if their parents have taught them the same things. Vice versa, if you don't have a gun in your house and you haven't had those conversations with your children, and they go to someone else's home, and there is, they have firearms in the house that may not be secured, educating them on what they should do and how they should handle that type of situation. So just want to emphasize the importance of educating the children, whether you have a gun in your house or not, on, what to do in either of those circumstances.
Definitely. And that's actually a great segue, Chief, because the next topic I wanted to talk about before we move on to ceasefire, and I thank you again for your patience, Grant. Before we move on, we had a topic on protecting children as a gun owner, and you touched upon it with educating the children, but at the same time, for an individual who may be a gun owner who has children, how can they ensure that their firearms are safely stored, prevent children from accessing them? I know we talked about the having a safe with a lock on it, but for Sheriff and the Chiefs, what do you think are the best practices for storing firearms in households with children?
Well, as Chief Suydam touched on, it's educating the children. And I think, and I can only say as a certified firearms instructor, one of the things that we talk about is with children, it's the curiosity is what mostly gets kids interested in seeing what that is, touching it, feeling it. And there again, I'm not telling people to familiarize your child with a weapon, but at the same time, that is usually the common reason for kids trying to access, or if they came across it because it's not stored properly, is the curiosity of a child. One thing that I will touch on with regards to gun safes. Who has access to that safe? Is it a commonly known key that is kept in a common place? Do other people in the house have access to it? And those type of things. To segue back off of what Chief Suydam said about educating children, one of the things that I encourage parents to do is if your kids are staying at someone else's house, you may know them to be a hunter or, an avid person who likes the sport of sportsmanship of firearms. Or are we asking the proper questions? Do you have guns in your house? And if you do, are they stored properly and are they safe? I mean, these are just basic, I think, questions of parenting that we can ask parents to do, even though it appears to be something more simple than a sleepover. But unfortunately, that's how accidents happen.
Absolutely. And then, Chief, was there anything that you wanted to add to that in terms of what you believe are some best practices for storing firearms in households with children?
No, I think the sheriff touched on most of it, going back to what he said in the beginning about making sure you have a secure location for those guns at all times, and that you have, a good communication with your family about that process.
Definitely. And you've both touched upon, educating children. So my next question then would be, are there any resources available either, within the sheriff's office or within the community to support gun owners who want to educate their children about gun safety and addressing concerns that are related to gun violence affecting children? Because like we did talk about, firearms are the #1 leading cause of death for children. So any resources that you guys would want to share either within the office or within the community as it relates to educating the youth about gun safety?
One of the things that we're currently not considering but would like to move forward with is a program called Eddie Eagle, which is a gun safety program for children. We're hoping to implement this in the fall once school was back in, to then start to get around to some of the schools here in Chester County to begin to implement and launch that education for the children.
Awesome. All right, sweet. So appreciate that, Sheriff and Chief. Next, I wanted to get into CeaseFirePA and wanted to hear from Grant, who is, like I said, the Southeast PA organizer for CeaseFirePA. First thing I wanted to ask you, Grant, is one, what is the mission of CeaseFirePA, and really how does it guide the organization's efforts in preventing gun violence? And if you also could share some of the key goals that the organization has.
Absolutely, Noah. Thank you again. So for those who are not familiar with CeaseFirePA, I think people are a little more familiar with the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and the Sheriff's Office. So, but we are the state's largest nonprofit gun violence prevention organization. We focus pretty much entirely on ending gun violence within the state of Pennsylvania. We obviously collaborate at a national level to a degree, but by and large, our efforts are focused on the people of Pennsylvania. And our vision, to sum it up as simply as possible, we want every person in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to be able to live a life without gun violence, where they can thrive and where their community can feel safe because they are safe from gun violence. We want people to be responsible firearm owners who can, safely enjoy using their firearms or not use firearms, whatever they want, but we want people to be safe at the end of the day. That's the most important thing to us. So everything we do comes back to that key mission.
Awesome. And then my next question would be, how does CeaseFirePA support legislative efforts to reduce gun violence at the state and local level? And would you be able to provide some examples of some recent legislative successes that the organization may have had.
Absolutely. I'm going to end up repeating a little bit of what Representative PLE said earlier, because he's talked about some of the bills that we've gotten passed through the House of Representatives. But the way that we try and support those legislative efforts of those bills that Representative PLE mentioned, that we all wholeheartedly support, something that we try and do is lift up the voices of people around the state of Pennsylvania. Because when you actually dig into what these issues are and what these solutions are, these laws, people support them at very, very high rates. An overwhelming majority of some people believe that, a domestic abuser should not, have a gun in their hand when they are committing an act of domestic violence, because then it's so much more likely to be fatal. So when you talk about that, people are so much more on board when you finally cut past the polarization and the partisanship. So what we want to do is we want to lift up people's voices so that they can advocate to their representatives, to their senators, to their other elected officials, city councilors, mayors, whatever, because it means more coming from them than it does from, say, somebody like me. Obviously, some representatives like Representative PLE, that we might have their ear a little bit more. But at the end of the day, we want the people who live in those districts to talk to their representatives and to feel like they can and advocate to them why this bill would be a good thing for the state of Pennsylvania, why it would save lives. And that's the core of what I do, is giving people the tools to advocate for change, to advocate for safer lives themselves.
Awesome. And then talked about legislative efforts and how CeaseFire collaborates with legislators. Now, how does CeaseFire collaborate with law enforcement agencies, as well as community organizations, to prevent or reduce gun violence?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, when it comes to law enforcement, something that's really important to us is listening to law enforcement agencies, both local, state, and federal, about what issues would make their jobs easier. What can we do to make it easier? Representative PLE talked about a bill to require lost and stolen reporting of firearms as a way to cut down on straw purchases. Now, straw purchases already are illegal in the state of Pennsylvania, but they're very difficult to prosecute. So a law requiring lost and stolen reporting for firearms would make the job easier for law enforcement so that they can go after these guns that are being illegally trafficked within the state of Pennsylvania. The same goes for House Bill 2206, which would cut down on the administrative red tape when it comes to records of sale for firearms. So something that's super important to us is listening to law enforcement, listening to their needs, listening to where the friction points in the system are and where we can make that easier for them, so that not only are they safer, but our communities are safer too, because they're able to do their job more effectively.
Absolutely.
And then pivoting right into communities, a big part of what we do is education. Like I said a minute ago, everything to me is about lifting up the voices of the people to advocate for change themselves. So a big part of what we do is we'll come out and educate people. We'll give talks about much more in depth about the issues of gun violence, the realities of it, and then also what we can do. We'll explain in depth, what does an extreme risk protection order do? How is it different from a PFA, a protection from abuse order? And what can you do to tell your representative that you care about this issue? Tell your senator that you care about this issue. So education is a huge part of what we do, because educating people, an educated populace, is going to be able to take action and make change. And I'd finally like to sort of conclude my community section with just talking about we like to try and work with on the ground community violence interrupting organizations. That the legislative part is only a piece of the puzzle. We want to work with smaller organizations that are doing the work in the communities that have been most affected by gun violence, giving them the tools to again advocate, but also listening to their needs, because it takes a village to end gun violence in Pennsylvania, and it's going to take a multitude of solutions from all angles to deal with this issue and put it behind the state of Pennsylvania.
100%, 100%. And I was going to ask you about community engagement efforts, but you did a great job of explaining right there. Was there anything else aside from, education and going out and supporting pieces of legislation? Are there any other community engagement efforts that the organization undertakes to really raise awareness about gun violence prevention?
Yeah, absolutely. June is Gun Violence Awareness Month. So we have a lot of events, all over the state of Pennsylvania to raise awareness about, what exactly is going on in our communities and what our elected officials are doing about that. We've had a series of votes this year. We're happy to say, obviously, that the bill to ban ghost guns passed the House of Representatives. It's now waiting for a vote in the Senate. But we want to make sure that people are aware of things like that. We want to reach out and again just educate people about the issues, because that's the first step to taking action.
Oh, certainly. And now, want to move into this last section with community involvement. This is really for all of you, but I can start with Grant since we're on the topic of how you were saying your community engagement efforts with Ceasefire. Just curious, for individuals looking to get involved, are there any volunteer programs or opportunities for community members who want to dedicate their time and their efforts on initiatives that are aimed at gun violence prevention?
Absolutely. It's not there. We're always looking for volunteers at CeaseFirePA, whether it's, if we have a table at a community event where we're giving out information, giving out cable locks to people in the community, we always need volunteers for things like that. I'm going to be running tables all across Chester County this summer. So volunteers for things like that, volunteers for, getting the word out about a recent vote, tell people, hey, here's how your representative voted on the last series of bills when it comes to gun safety. So we absolutely always need volunteers like that. The best way is, and I'm sure that after this we can include my contact information, whether in some form or another. The best way is to get in contact with me. And I work with so many community organizations in every corner of Chester County. So if you're from Phoenixville and you want to get involved in a faith-based group, I can probably connect you to a faith-based group up in Phoenixville that's doing this work. Or if you're in Avongrove and looking for a more community organization, I can probably connect people with that too. There's so many people across the county who are doing this great work that I absolutely do not have the time to list them right now. Good problem to have.
Absolutely. No, it's a great problem to have. But thank you, Grant. I really appreciate the answers and the insights into Ceasefire and the mission and the goals. I did want to turn back to Representative Pielli. Question is, how can community members engage with legislative efforts at the state level to support any gun violence initiatives?
Yeah, so I think to echo Grant, there's plenty of opportunities to become educated through organizations like his as to, what pertinent legislation is pending, where it is at, who are the gatekeepers, so to speak, legislatively, the holdouts, that sort of thing. The old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. When a legislator looks out his window or her window and sees hundreds of people and they're, pushing that legislator to do something for common sense gun legislation, that legislature is going to take notice and to say, well, it looks like my constituents really feel that this is important. What unfortunately we're dealing with, the reality is, time and time again, any poll that you take that's worth its salt is going to show that the vast majority of Americans and Pennsylvanians agree with these initiatives. And that's a fact. The problem is the lobbying power of the NRA and other groups that splinter off from them, extremely powerful. And they have a hold on, one of the parties. And it's a stranglehold. And to get anything passed is difficult. That's just the reality. I'm not trying to play politics here. I'm speaking truth. And that's the nut we have to crack. But I mean, history shows that when you're on the right side of history, on the right side of events, and you keep pushing for these events, eventually the door will kick in and common sense gun legislation will be successful. I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment. I'm a gun owner. I've got a license to carry from our great sheriff's office here. They do so many wonderful things, including one of the things they transport um, from the correctional facility. That's another really important thing that they do. I didn't hear that. I might have missed it, but just wanted to give a shout out there for them and all the wonderful things they do. But partnering with folks like that in the law enforcement community, the ideas and the initiatives that they're doing, this program for youth that Sheriff Dykes is talking about, raising this awareness, getting them while they're young, that's so important. I take my hat off to you. I think that's a fantastic initiative. So it does take a village, as Grant said. I think collectively we will succeed, but we have to keep plugging away at this.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Representative Pielli. And now I wanted to just transition back to the sheriff's office. And Chief and Sheriff, you already did a good job of kind of answering this question previously, but I will ask if there's anything that you do want to add to it, specifically in relation to gun owners. How can they engage with us at the sheriff's office to access resources, training, educational materials aimed at promoting responsible gun ownership? I know we kind of already talked about it a little bit previously, but is there anything else that gun owners can do to seek resources, educational materials, or any other programs, even if it's not directly applicable with the sheriff's office, if there's something else in Chester County that they could go to?
The one thing I would mention is, as we talked about before, we're issuing thousands and thousands of permits a year. And unfortunately, out of those thousands and thousands of permits that are being issued, there's a smaller portion of people that aren't actually going to training or doing the responsible thing, which is educating themselves and their families. And we've pushed this point in the conversation today, but there is a responsibility of each person, not only to come to the sheriff's office and get whatever training we have to offer, but the other part is the internet is available. You can look a lot of this stuff up on the internet yourself. If you have questions, reach out to the sheriff's office. The sheriff does a very good job of interacting with members of the public that have questions. And we will be glad to have those discussions. And I know that the sheriff continues to push his effort on gun safety and awareness and pushing that training out. And then also for the community and the kids, educating them. I think we'll continue to do that, but advocate for individuals who are interested in information to contact us and work with us on a regular basis to get everybody educated and trained to the best of our ability.
Despite what people's opinion may be about the social media aspect, but to echo what the chief said, we have a website, we have Facebook, we have all this social media, Instagram, thanks to our wonderful Command Liaison Noah. If there are any questions or anything that you would like to ask, please go to those outlets and reach out to us. Feel free to stop in and, to our permit section and ask the questions. Like I said, we don't give legal advice, but we will at least guide you in the right direction with regards to, the gun safety approach.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Chief. Thank you for that, Sheriff. We had questions from the public, but like I said, due to some technical difficulties, we're going to have those questions posted for the public to go alongside with this video. But did just want to say some closing remarks. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to all of you for attending this and taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak upon this important topic of promoting responsible gun ownership and preventing and reducing gun violence within our county. Just wanted to reiterate, some of the things we talked about today. First and foremost, the importance of responsible gun ownership and safety techniques. Talked about legislative and community efforts to reduce and prevent gun violence. And at the same time, we talked about, the role of law enforcement, legislators and advocacy groups in promoting gun safety. And, we did talk about it a little bit in this webinar, but, we all stand with the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, supporting the rights of responsible gun owners. Main thing we want to do is, like kind of Grant said, it takes a village to really, address this important issue of preventing gun violence in our community. So just want to say that, but also, like I said, I just want to say thank you to all of you, all our speakers today, for your valuable contributions and for participating. And like we talked about, for those of you seeing this when it's posted on the socials, definitely don't be afraid to reach out to Representative Pielli's office, CeaseFirePA, the Sheriff's office, if you need any information or seeking any resources about what you can do to become a responsible gun owner, if you're looking for gun safety techniques, or if you're just looking for ways to get involved in the community and preventing gun violence. That's really all we had. I know we're right at the almost at the hour mark now, but just wanted to say thank you all again so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, just thank you. All right, let me stop this recording real quickly. All right. Awesome. All right. Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
It's good seeing you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
Chris.
seeing you all
Very
too.
much appreciated.
Yep. Take care, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you,
All
Grant.
right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
all.
you.